Today is Saturday, June 23rd, 2018. Hello, and welcome to Weekly Astrology Notes for the week of June 24th through July the 1st, 2018. Highlights for this week. On Sunday the 24th, we have another long void of course. Starts from early morning until well past sunset. So it's another day to relax and reflect, which pretty much sets the theme for the first half of the week. On Monday, it's a pretty easygoing day with Venus square Jupiter. Folks are lazy and indulgent, not in the mood for hard work or discipline. It's really a great aspect for a social gathering. On Tuesday, we have yet another long moon void of course, lasting from the early morning until early Wednesday morning. So this one's going to be more than 24 hours. So once again on Tuesday, not a day to start new projects. Start of a couple of days of reflection that will make the midweek seem to go by rather slowly. It's time for rest and rejuvenation, going within and meditating. Nothing outwardly expansive. And as well, Mars goes retrograde today. I have a lot to say about that when we get there. And then on Wednesday, we have kind of another low-key day with Sun opposition Saturn, while the moon is in Capricorn, and also conjuncting Saturn as well that day. And we also have the full moon in Capricorn. So it's a very Capricorn day. A day for reflection and self-evaluation. It kind of slows us down. You might feel a little bit doubtful or hesitant. This full moon is best spent taking care of your body, eating right, getting plenty of rest to rejuvenate the body. And then on Thursday, the moon in Capricorn brings us a couple of nice aspects, and Mercury starts 2 months in Leo because it's going to go retrograde while in Leo. So instead of the usual 2.5 weeks per sign, Mercury is going to be in Leo for more than 2 months. And then on Friday, we have yet another long void of course. This is the third one this week. This one will be from before dawn until well past sunset. So Friday as well is asking us to reflect and meditate. And then we get an exciting aspect on Saturday, Mercury square Uranus. It'll be happening in the morning. It means a sudden change of plans. Brings the need to adapt quickly and act decisively. And then on Sunday, the 1st, moon in Aquarius. Brings a couple of pleasant aspects. It's a good day to be with friends. And at the end of the video, I'm going to go over the transits for Mexico because they're going to be having their upcoming national elections on July the 1st. Also going to be going over the transits for Trump and at his recent solar return, which was on June the 14th. And then I'm going to go over the transits for USA and the EU. And actually, I've got a little bit more to add about that Nemesis Nibiru system, which I continue to focus on and continue to gather more information on that as I see it to be a very pertinent subject, something we should all be paying attention to. Okay, so let's get started with Sunday the 24th. Starting early in the morning with the moon in Scorpio sextiling Pluto. So that's lots of Scorpio energy on the moon. Brings up deep feelings and emotions, makes us kind of intense. It's a good time for intentional body movement like yoga or something with a healing intent. And then also in the morning we've got moon trine Mercury. And this one is Scorpio to Cancer, so you're able to share your intimate feelings with your partner. It's a good time for a heart-to-heart conversation, more in touch with our instincts and able to sense energy. A void, of course, begins and continues until the evening, so it's a day to relax and not start new projects. And then in the evening, the moon enters Sagittarius. So we're more optimistic and looking to expand for the next couple of days and more spontaneous. Don't need a reason. Just grant yourself license and just do it. And for gardeners, moon in Sagittarius is a dry time. Not the time for planting. Let your garden grow by weeding and getting rid of the pests. Okay, moving along to Monday, the 25th. We start in the morning with the Venus square Jupiter. So let's see here. This will be 13, almost 14 degrees of Leo to 13 degrees of Scorpio. It's a very nice square. There's really no harsh effects when these two planets get together for a square. Instead, you get an abundance of warmth, a tendency to extravagance, although poor financial judgment, although it is a good time for business, as folks are more apt to spend on luxury items, beauty items, stuff you really just don't need to survive. You just kind of want to splurge and enjoy spending money. Not interested in hard work or discipline. We're kind of lazy and indulgent. Prefer to take the day off and go to the beach, possibly. Not concerned with the details. Not a day to make or sign agreements. We're thinking too big, and we may regret it in leaner times. Gives us a very pleasant disposition and an easygoing attitude. Not judgmental. We tend to overlook the bad things, forgive, and move on. And it's a great aspect for a social gathering. And then later in the afternoon, we got the enjoyable moon sextile Mars. Sagittarius to Aquarius. Lots of physical energy, and in these signs, you need to stretch. The perfect aspect for conscious body movement and yoga, stuff like that, or maybe Tai Chi. I always say yoga, but there's so many other different ones out there. So any sort of conscious body movement, because Aquarius, really, you're trying to do things that are new, and Sagittarius loves to stretch and expand. And when you get the sextile between those two signs, it really is the perfect setup for something like that. Okay, so moving along to Tuesday, the 26th. Starting early in the morning, we've got the moon trine Venus. Gives us a pleasant disposition. And the trine from Leo to Sagittarius, that's taking that creative energy from Leo and giving it expression in the outer world in Sagittarius. So it's an opportunity to get yourself noticed. Especially with Venus in Leo, really wants to be noticed. Okay, and continuing on, Tuesday morning, we've got the moon square Neptune. And in these signs, Sagittarius to Pisces, we feel rather idealistic, but we're easily deluded, and we desire to escape to freedom. A long void, of course, begins now and continues until tomorrow morning. So this is a void, of course, that lasts more than 24 hours. So Tuesday is a slow day, not a day to start new projects, really without direction for a while, especially with Mars going retrograde at 9 degrees 13 minutes of Aquarius starting on Tuesday afternoon, and it's going to go all the way down to 28 degrees 37 minutes of Capricorn on August the 27th. And during the time of Mars retrograde, the energy of Mars turns inward, requiring you to think before you act. Although we really need to do that as a general rule in life, now the issue becomes more important. Regressive Mars tendencies, such as anger, abuse, sexual misconduct, that kind of energy gets turned inward and can be self-destructive. And we become more aware of the pain that those things can cause. It's really a time to kind of clean up our act with regards to the regressive Mars tendencies that we have. The aspects surrounding the moment of the retrograde emphasize the need to hesitate and reflect on matters before acting. We've got the Sun opposition Saturn, which will be happening on Thursday, on Wednesday, tomorrow. And that aspect kind of takes the wind out of your sails and asks you to find your weak spots and fix them. And the moon is in the middle of this extra long void, of course, today. So we're really without direction during this Mars retrograde period. I see a need to hesitate and reevaluate your situation before moving ahead. Now is a time to spend gaining more knowledge. Aquarius says, I know, and we all need to sharpen our minds, become more enlightened, become more aware of trends and social currents, what's new and what's enlightening, kind of help us break out of our stagnant patterns, especially stagnant thinking patterns, because those patterns really inhibit your physical movement while Mars is in Aquarius. So there's this real connection between physicality and intellectual awareness at this time. Group activities are going to be more challenging now with Mars retrograde in Aquarius, more frustrating as groups are without direction and they need to gather new information. And I can't emphasize that enough. That's really what you need to be doing now, because this is an Aquarius. Gathering new information and reflecting upon it before moving ahead. Now, this Mars retrograde is resulting in 3 passes of the aspect Mars square Uranus. We already had the first pass, that was back on May 16th, but we're due for 2 more passes. August 1st during the retrograde period, and then September 18th after it goes direct once again. This is probably the most important aspect to focus on during this time, because after all, it's Mars in Aquarius most of the time, and it's squaring Uranus, which rules Aquarius. So it's an aspect that's bringing conflict within groups and within friendships. It's time to reevaluate our idealistic perspectives and see how adherence to group norms restricts your conscious awareness of what's really going on, thus preventing you from evolving in your own right. So it's, the groupthink that prevents you from developing your own unique abilities. And that issue is going to come to a head for a lot of us during this time, which is why we need to think before we act, gather information, and don't necessarily go along with the group, because they might be going in the wrong direction. And I'll talk more about Mars returning to the last couple of degrees, which is of Capricorn, which is going to be from August the 14th to September the 12th when we get there, because there's going to be some interesting things to talk about with regards to that. But as always, check your transits during this period and see what Mars is doing to the planets in your chart. Okay, moving along to Wednesday, the 27th. We start in the morning with Sun opposition Saturn. And that'll be 5 degrees of Cancer to 5 degrees of Capricorn. So today, creative energy meets opposition and limitations. It's time of culmination, when you feel events are foretold by your character. It's kind of a really important day. It's a karmic day. You can't really change what's going to happen, because karma is, what Saturn is associated with. And when the Sun opposition comes, whatever events happen, they're pretty much already foretold by the way you behaved in the past. So you may be tested or judged based on things you've done in the past. Today, we need to try to balance the need for self-expression with duties and responsibilities. So it's kind of like a wet blanket. It really slows us down. We really need to focus on career or be concerned about that. It lowers our energy level, kind of brings up pessimistic thinking, makes obligations seem heavier than usual, and creativity is inhibited, and some may prefer to just be quiet and not talk much at all, kind of go within their shell. On a psychological level, this aspect turns you inside out, and when you think about it, the sun is the very core of our being. The symbol of the sun is the circle, and then that dot right in the middle of the circle, well, that's supposed to be you, okay? And Saturn is our finite boundary around us, our limitation. So it's like the inside of you, that little dot, goes to the outside, the limitations, and all the limitations come to the inside. That's why it kind of turns you inside out psychologically. And when the inside moves out, you become acutely aware of the boundary between yourself and others, and that brings depression, a common ailment with this aspect. And when the outside moves in, suddenly you feel the weight of the world on your heart, and that too brings depression. So we all need to get turned inside out sometimes, because if there's something deep within you that's not finding adequate expression, or if your duties and responsibilities prevent you from fulfilling your creative potential, that's the sun, is your creativity, then you need to see that. You need to get turned inside out. And even though it kind of really slows you down, it is a great aspect for self-evaluation, finding your mistakes, taking responsibility for yourself. Sometimes the world feels kind of cold and uncaring, like there's this invisible barrier between you and everyone else. It's hard to get help from others today, because you kind of feel isolated. But I would suggest, you don't fall into the pessimism or the bitterness, and rise above that and stay in present time. Stay in the present moment. Focus on the present tasks. Realize that people are just not as available for others as usual. It's a day of objective evaluation and how you're doing in life. It's like we're all sitting down for a test, and few folks will have extra time on their hands. So like I say, it brings up that low energy, and really it's a good time to spend alone. Yeah, especially with this long void of course that's going on all day until this evening when the moon enters Capricorn. So I think that it will probably be best if we go through this time of reflection and meditation and not outward expansion. And that's just the general quality of this week. The moon enters Capricorn in the evening, so we're more reserved and focused on duty for the next couple of days. We tend to contract and reevaluate things. We're more concerned about our finances and our career, reputation, matters of self-preservation. We can be stubborn and pessimistic and hard to get going. You may need to push yourself. Just don't worry about the past. And once again, the best thing is to focus on the present moment. Whenever you feel strong Capricorn, Saturn energy in your life, you just really want to focus on the present moment, and you will be amazed at how efficient and self-disciplined you are when you're in that state of mind. And for gardeners, Capricorn is an earth sign. It's a good time to plant root crops. Okay, and then in the early afternoon on Wednesday, we've got the moon trine Uranus. Probably the only ambitious point in the day. Thank you, Uranus, for bringing a little bit of levity to all this Capricorn energy. Looking for opportunities for material gain, something to boost your reputation. And then later in the evening, we get back down into the Capricorn energy again with the moon conjunct Saturn. Emotional restructuring happens once a month, a time of therapy and self-evaluation, taking stock of what you have and making sure it will last. Not as emotionally available for others, may have to take on the role of parent or authority figure for someone else. And then we've got the full moon in Capricorn, moon opposition sun, and that'll be in the evening. A bit of a challenging full moon because the moon opposes Cancer this time, which is its native sign. So it's a point of culmination for this month's growth, as the full moon always is. And as usual, we sense a crisis for fulfillment, a need for recognition from the outer world. We're more sensitive to what other people think about us, and hence a bit more defensive. Generally, emotions run high, but in Capricorn, the moon is quiet and reserved, concerned about reputation, so there's a lot of repressed energy going on. Digestion is slowed down. You might want to eat a warm meal. It helps. In these signs, it's similar to the Sun opposition Saturn aspect. Once again, it brings up doubts. You feel like others don't care about you. And again, live in the present moment. And at this full moon, I think the most important thing to do is to take care of your body. Eat right and get plenty of rest to help the body rejuvenate. And that's really what you want to do. Kind of crawl into your shell and let your body rejuvenate. Okay, moving along to Thursday, 28th. We start in the early afternoon with the moon sextile Jupiter. More principled in our behavior now, especially towards one another. We're very judicious when those beneficial Jupiter aspects come along. We all want to be that Jupiter energy, especially towards one another. So it's a good time for business and any type of negotiations. People are acting very just. And then in the early evening, we've got the moon sextile Neptune. This one makes us imaginative and philanthropic. And that's that sextile from Capricorn to Pisces. It brings up philanthropy because we want to give to those who really need it and those who genuinely deserve it. Also, we're more sensitive, willing to sacrifice, desire to help others, especially those who deserve it. And then in the evening, Mercury enters Leo for more than 2 months, until September the 6th. So Mercury is in its detriment in Leo. It's kind of stubborn there. And the conscious thinking process becomes focused on romance and recreation, can be overly dramatic, and a bit too self-centered and stubborn, really like all of the fixed signs. Nevertheless, in this placement, Mercury has a positive outlook, is good at teaching, and likes to be on stage. Okay, so like Venus in Leo, obviously we want people to pay a little bit more attention to us, kind of be the center of attention, play the role of the lion, and that's going to be going on for a while. So we have a lot of work to do on that. And check your transits, where's Leo in your chart. Mercury's going to be spending a lot of time in that house, so you're going to be doing a lot of communication with regards to matters related to that house. So check your chart to see where that's happening for you. Moving along to Friday, the 29th. We start early in the morning with the moon conjunct Pluto. This one brings a strong burst of energy. Actually, it's the middle of the night for those of us on the West Coast. And it's a strong burst of energy, very impulsive and a bit destructive, as you're looking to establish a new base emotional state. And that's what's so wonderful about the moon conjunct Pluto. Once a month, we get this opportunity to wipe the slate clean and remove some basic, maybe negative feeling or emotion, and develop a new base emotional state. It can be very helpful and very transformative. When used positively, it's very productive because we're able to utilize all available resources. That's what Pluto is like. It's like the village well. And when the moon conjuncts Pluto, you can go down to the village well and draw from it whatever you need, or whatever resources that you need. They are available and they're at your disposal. You just have to be aware of it. Maybe you don't think you deserve it because it's Capricorn or something. Maybe you're judging yourself. But really, you do have a right to go down there and dip your bucket in the well and pull the collective resources that you need to transform your life as you see fit and make a change for the better. And as always, you want to use that Pluto energy for the benefit of others as well as yourself. And yet again, another long void, of course, begins. Continues until actually the middle of the night, until much later this evening. So Friday is yet another quiet day, time for reflection and not starting any new projects. And then later in the evening, the moon enters Aquarius. So we have more of a group consciousness for the next couple of days. We're more concerned about our social group and social causes. We're more friendly, yet impersonal. And gardeners, moon in Aquarius is a dry time. It's not a good time for planting. Much like Sagittarius from earlier in the week, it's a good time to remove the weeds and take care of the pests. Okay, moving along to the weekend now. Saturday the 30th. We start in the middle of the night with the moon opposition Mercury. So moon is part of the Mercury square Uranus aspect that we're having this morning. Kind of joins in for the fun. Emotions are going to interfere with the thinking and speaking, and communication, I should say. And we're having the moon square Uranus shortly afterwards. So that one's going to have us feeling agitated, especially with moon in Aquarius. And restless, more intelligent though, more aware of what we're not getting on a social level. We're friendly but rather impersonal. We feel conflict between our personal values and our social obligations. And then early on Saturday, we've got Mercury square Uranus. And this will be from 2 degrees of Leo to 2 degrees of Taurus. So we're looking for something stimulating to excite the mind. Concerned with your personal freedom and your independence. Say very independent thinking. A desire to change. Sometimes just for the sake of change. To break up the monotony. Expressing yourself in an unconventional way, out of the ordinary. And kind of bring up quirky behavior. Interesting conversations though. Folks say what's on their mind. sometimes surprising stuff really comes out on these kind of aspects. We're more intelligent because Uranus brings that to the conscious mind. We're compelled to bring things out into the open, air things out. Everyone becomes equal intellectually, and we can all share ideas, maybe even some crazy ideas. So there's lots of mental activity. People have brilliant ideas, I should say, as well. But because it's a square, we can be judgmental about other people's intelligence or perceived lack thereof. Okay, so you might want to be aware of that. But it is a very good aspect for creative projects, especially using your hands. The work is unique and has an eccentric quality. As well, it's a good time for writing. You may experience a sudden change of plans on Saturday morning. A challenge to adapt quickly may come up, forcing you to act decisively. You really need to think on your feet. It may bring about aggressive or unusual driving habits, or you may desire to take a different route, something different out of the norm. It's a square from Taurus to Leo. So in that square, Taurus is our money and Leo is our creative energy, so we're concerned about having enough money for our creative projects. So within us, it brings up the question, what's life worth if you can't do what you want, or if you can't create the way you want to? And that's what that square brings up. It makes us really reevaluate ourselves and decide once and for all to live first and foremost for ourselves. It can be really strengthening to the heart if you take it to heart and do what's necessary to resolve that question. What's life worth if you can't do what you want? Consequently, you may make a break for freedom, reject traditional ideas in favor of a new way. Uranus loves to do that. It can really work out to your benefit if you channel this energy in the right direction. And it also could bring up a lot of heated conversations if people are very stuck in their views, because this aspect, it really requires us to be adaptable and to not be so stuck on our viewpoints. So you might run into some of that, but otherwise I think it's a pretty good aspect. It's very exciting and very stimulating to the mind. And then on Saturday afternoon, we have the Moon conjunct Mars in Aquarius. This one's going to make us impulsive, demanding, and you need to be mindful of the rights of others when you get this one, because we tend to be so focused on ourselves and our own rights and privileges that we're not as aware of other people. Although it gives us lots of energy, it's great for physical activity, sports, and competition. And in Aquarius, you really need to stretch, move your body in a different way. Moving along to Sunday, the 1st, finishing up the week. The middle of the night, we've got Moon square Jupiter. That one's got us feeling rather friendly, generous, but with poor financial judgment. I want to take note of that for going to be out late on Saturday night. And then in the afternoon on Sunday, Moon opposition Venus. This one's got us feeling sensitive, kind of easily hurt. It's not really a good time for social gatherings. So that's all this week for the weekly aspects. Moving along to interesting stories for this week, Mexico is having their general elections on the 1st, so I thought I'd bring up their transits for that day. And looking at the stories in the news, looks like this guy Lopez Obrador is the front runner. He's kind of a socialist, but things aren't doing too well in Mexico these days. It's turned into the world's deadliest conflict zone, only after Syria, and the murder rates are really high. I'll leave links if you're interested in going into that. But this Sunday they've got the elections, so I thought I'd take a look at that. And sure enough, look at this, Neptune conjunct Pluto, 16 degrees of Pisces. It's basically gone stationary retrograde right on top of their Pluto. So this week they're getting the second pass, and also that's along with the Neptune squaring midheaven coming up soon, 16 degrees of Gemini. So the reason why I think that's so important is because Pluto has to do with collective resources like oil, and this socialist guy Obrador is talking about socializing the oil in that country. And, it's a collective resource ruled by Pluto, so they're obviously going to have a lot of idealistic Neptunian notions about Pluto things like oil. But really, I think they're kind of deluding themselves, because really this desire or this reliance on oil is what's causing the world so many problems. In fact, there's already free energy technology. It's just waiting to be deployed as soon as people wake up to the enslavement caused by reliance on oil. Nonetheless, the transit certainly is making them very idealistic, kind of looking for a savior, which I think is what this socialist guy kind of represents for them right now. But on a long-term scale, it has having other effects, because Pluto rules things done in the dark and things like the drug cartels. So people are looking for an all-encompassing solution with regards to that, and hopefully dissolving their influence, dissolving them. As well, this transit highlights a major issue in their natal chart, which is their Pluto opposition ascendant, which I think gives them a rather antagonistic and confrontational attitude towards people in power or towards other people's resources. And that's because with Pluto in the 7th house, 7th house rules other people, and you tend to focus on the collective resources, Pluto, of other people rather than your own. And I think that is the psychological underpinnings of why, even though they've got so much oil and natural resources, they fail to utilize them for themselves. Instead, they migrate north and essentially utilize the resources of other people, which is, again, Pluto in the 7th house. They gravitate towards the resources of others instead of learning to utilize their own resources. It kind of makes them paranoid and jealous of what others have. I think it also leads to this immigration that we've seen. They can't get their own resources together, so they have to try and utilize someone else's. And this Neptune transit is bringing that to a head as well. And the whole country is really dissolving. People are talking about splitting it up. In the northeast state of Nuevo Leon, people are talking about that a lot. And these Uranus transits that are on the horizon coming next year, starting with Uranus conjunct Pluto, followed by Uranus opposition Venus. This is going to have a profound effect on them as well. It's going to bring revolution. The moon rules the home, so it could bring a lot of change and revolution at home, as well as the opposition to Venus in Scorpio. I'm thinking they really want to take on the drug cartels and those who have repressed them. And that includes the U.S. counterparts to these drug cartels, many of whom are in power in the U.S. government, like the Bush regime for so many years. So a lot of that stuff is going to come out into the open next year. And it all starts, I think, now with this Neptune conjunct Pluto. As far as this Sunday is concerned, they are having Mercury in their 11th house, trining their Saturn and Neptune, which I think is going to give them a lot of social awareness. And Saturn at 5 degrees of Capricorn is going to be trining their moon at 5 degrees of Taurus. And it's going to make them conservative, concerned with duty and responsibility, material matters, very practical. And the moon, Mercury square the moon, that could mean they have to make an uncomfortable decision. But I'm also looking at this moon in Aquarius going into their 6th house, both of which tells me they're going to have a lot of socialist sentiment from both of that, moon in Aquarius and moon in the 6th house. They tend to be rather socialist in their perspective. So I think that could play into it. So this guy Obrador is probably going to be pretty lucky, I think, with regards to what's going on. And if you'll notice, I even looked up this guy's transits. He's having Mercury squaring Saturn on the day of the election. I think people are going to take him very seriously. You're going to see him as a very Saturnian, safe, structured kind of a guy. As well, Mars is very close to his moon, so he's going to have a lot of passion, and the folks in Mexico are really going to pick up on that. All in all, I'd say his chances look good. Now, of course, I cannot predict he wins because we all know, or at least we all should know by now, that everywhere in the world elections are rigged, and certainly Mexico is no exception. And last of all, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and Pluto, they're all currently retrograde. So whomever wins, they're going to have to do a lot of adjustments. So anyway, that's my take on Mexico elections coming up on the 1st. Moving along to Donald Trump, mentioning him this week because on Wednesday the 27th, getting the second pass of Saturn square Neptune. You'll see here Saturn at 5 degrees of Capricorn, squaring his natal Neptune at 5 degrees of Libra. This is a transit that has been giving him a lot of difficulty. His objectives are unclear. Have you noticed it's kind of been that way for him lately? He's lost some of his confidence. He's not really sure who his trusted friends are or if he has any at all. Feels disappointed at not being able to reach his goals. And because he's president, he doesn't have the luxury of being able to cast aside the things that are giving him such confusion and uncertainty, so he suffers through it. And certainly he feels low on energy and needs a lot of people around him to boost his confidence. He brings up career doubts. That's what happens with Saturn square Neptune. Possibly he feels like he's sacrificing something that he's worked for in exchange for following a belief system. Kind of have to surrender some of your beliefs there. And of course, the Libra to Capricorn square, secrets are revealed, but it could be him who reveals the secrets. After all, he's the one who's the authority figure in this case. So there could be an interesting manifestation for this. I'm still waiting for things to be revealed regarding the deep state, which I know he has the ability to do, but I know this whole Russian collusion thing still needs to be settled first. But anyway, this month on the 13th, the new moon occurred right on top of his sun, which is rather fortuitous for him. And here I've got his solar return, transits right on his birthday, the 14th of June. And you can see where the moon is, very close to his sun there. And that is actually really good, but he does have some tough challenges this year. The Saturn square Neptune, which I already mentioned, as well as the Saturn opposition Mercury. It limits his voice. And the Mars quincunx Mercury. This is kind of interesting because Mars was exactly conjunct the South Node at the moment of his solar return. And that makes a quincunx pretty close to his Mercury at 8 degrees of Cancer. And I'm thinking, okay, the Mars quincunx Mercury, it's taking on more responsibilities, but at the same time it gives him great adaptability. But the Mars conjunct the South Node exactly at the solar return. I'm not too familiar with that. Possibly he needs to avoid rehashing old karmic agreements. Okay, because that's what the Mars conjunct the South Node has to do with. So I would say he should avoid that sort of thing. Nonetheless, I still hold out hope that good elements in our government and military, who are the ones who recruited Trump, I hope they are successful in draining the swamp. So taking a look at the USA this week, I always like to look at them at the same time. Let's see what happens this week. We got the second pass of Saturn opposition Jupiter. You'll see here transiting Saturn at 5 degrees of Capricorn is about to make a second pass at opposing the natal Jupiter at 5 degrees of Cancer. So that one is time to stop and reevaluate your goals. Make sure you're on the right path. A transit that brings you back to reality, sometimes in a good way, but it brings some hesitation, cutting back on plans for growth, the need to find and fix your own mistakes. It's a similar quality to the Sun opposition Saturn aspect we're getting this week on Wednesday. So the kind of a similar energy there, and as well maybe a restriction on news or publications, or maybe they suffer a much needed encounter with reality, maybe a dose of karma for Jupiter organizations like the news media. Okay, so, but it also brings a need for diplomacy as we're striking a balance between two opposing forces, because Jupiter is to expand and Saturn is to contract. So it's really striking a balance between those two opposing forces. It's really not a time for any sort of outward expansion. And I wanted to talk about the EU this week because finally on Sunday the 24th, Uranus conjuncts their midheaven and enters their 10th house, and finally ends its long passage through their 9th house, which has brought liberal policies regarding foreigners. The issue came to a head right at the Uranus opposition Jupiter recently, which exposed these policies and brought hidden things to light and revealed all of their self-sabotaging effects, because it was opposition to the 9th house from Jupiter. Interesting that as soon as Uranus conjuncts their midheaven, things all of a sudden begin to change in earnest. Many EU nations are changing their stance, turning away the immigrants, especially now that the summer is here. Later this year, Uranus will dip back down into their 9th house for a time as they revisit the issue one last time, probably to try and save their unrealistic immigration policy. But this time they won't be able to, because the recent passage of Pluto conjuncting their Uranus and Neptune here, it's transformed them completely. It's transformed their goal of creating a egalitarian utopia, which is one of the main pillars of this chart of the EU. And now that Pluto has come in like a volcano, that reality no longer exists. So this is going to get really interesting now that Pluto has done its job on their utopian ideal. Uranus now goes into their 10th house. It's going to bring a much more conservative and nationalistic authority to the EU. Their immigration policies will change to reflect a completely new direction for them. Uranus going through the 10th house will mean a fall from international significance, as they suffer a number of humiliating blows to their reputation, and even go through periods of revolt when Uranus opposes all these planets in the 4th house in Scorpio, as well as conjuncts their natal moon eventually. Wow, when Uranus reaches 24 degrees of Taurus, watch out. There's going to be open revolution in the EU. You know, I've said in the past that whoever decided on this natal chart for the EU, well, destroying the EU culture was their main goal, because you can't have Pluto conjunct Mars in the 4th house, exactly opposing the moon, and not think that you're going to destroy the culture. They knew what they were doing. The EU will dramatically change as these Uranus transits arrive over the next several years. In the meantime, politics will get more conservative in the EU for sure. Okay, finishing up this week, talk about the Nemesis Nibiru system, which I've been talking about for the last couple of weeks. Well, on June the 16th, the FAA weather cams in Alaska were shut down. It looks like they've been the source of so many great images of this system, and it looks like whoever they are getting nervous. And the recent rise in awareness is really getting to worry them. But not to worry, the number of videos about it seems to have grown exponentially, and there are many YouTube channels dedicated to locating and tracking the system. I have several more good links to share with you this week, which I'll leave in the description for those that are interested to do this. Now, my primary interest in all of this is to find out where it's located, so we can get a better understanding of the transits, the psychological effects that it's having on all of us. No doubt it is causing a great awakening of spiritual awareness, and it helps to understand that this is a collective event, despite the profoundly personal experience that each of us is having. A collective event, good or bad, always has the positive effect of bringing people together. Okay, so that's it for this week, and on a special note, I'm taking a week off for summer vacation around the 4th of July. Wishing everyone a great holiday, and Weekly Astrology Notes will return the week of July 8th to the 14th. Again, thanks for viewing, liking, and sharing my video. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Weekly Astrology Notes will return after a one-week vacation. Many blessings, and have a great day.